Hey hikers and outdoor lovers, what if your next adventure could help cure children's cancer? With the Cure Search Ultimate Hike, that's exactly what you'll do. Choose from 8 breathtaking trails and destinations across the country, like Mount Tamalpais in the Bay Area, the stunning Jackson Hole, or the scenic Shenandoah Valley. And that's just the start. Here's the challenge. Each Ultimate Hike pushes you to go the distance, up to 28 miles in a single day. It's tough, but it's totally doable, no matter your fitness level. Shorter distance options are available, and you'll get expert training every step of the way, both in person and virtually, so you'll be ready to tackle the trails like a pro. And as a special thank you for tuning in to the Hikes and Mikes podcast, you can register for the 2025 Ultimate Hike for free. Just use the promo code Hikes and Mikes when you sign up at theultimatehike.org, and your registration fee is waived. Ultimate Hike is the nation's largest endurance program dedicated to funding childhood cancer research. So if you're ready to lace up your boots, hit ultimatehike.org and let's hike together to make a life-saving impact. Don't forget, use code Hikes and Mikes, all one word, for free registration. Let's hit the trails and cure kids' cancer. Welcome everyone to the Hikes and Mikes podcast. I'm your host Ivan, and together we'll embark on a weekly journey connecting with extraordinary hikers from all corners of the United States and beyond. Throughout these fall months, we've had the privilege of conversing with some remarkable individuals. Their experiences and adventures will leave you yearning to hit the trails. In this week's episode, we have an amazing guest with us. They are the outdoors reporter for the Los Angeles Times. Their name is Jaclyn, and you can follow them on Instagram at jacinthewild.la. In this episode, we talked to Jaclyn about their journey from enjoying the outdoors while growing up in Oklahoma to now hitting the trails in and around Los Angeles County. They share with us some of the wonderful things happening in and around the Los Angeles hiking scene, including the increasingly popular full moon hikes. Plus, you won't want to miss out on hearing about their unique encounter with 2 snakes who were wrestling in the bushes. Without further ado, let's jump into this episode with our guest, Jaclyn. Welcome everyone to the latest episode of the Hikes and Mikes podcast. I have a really awesome guest with me today. They are the outdoors reporter for the Los Angeles Times, and they're going to be sharing about their hiking experiences in and around Los Angeles County. Jaclyn, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. We always like to start off by having our guests share a little bit about themselves and how they got started hiking.
No, thank you so much for having me, Ivan. I'm really happy to be here. I grew up in a really small town in rural Oklahoma. If you think about the state of Oklahoma like a pan, I'm like down in the southeast corner. And so it's a lot of trees, a lot of hills. My family has about 300 acres there. And we had goats, a lot of goats for a good chunk of my childhood. A lot of my memories are playing in creeks and our ponds with just my dogs and my brother and my cousins and just being a little country kid. And as I got older, I got more interested in the outdoors. But, in Oklahoma, only about 5% of Oklahoma is public land compared to like California, which is just over half public land. And so I found myself wanting to hike in Oklahoma, but being limited where I could go. And so once my wife and I and our dog Maggie moved to LA in 2017, I just went full gangbusters and was hiking a lot, making a lot of mistakes and learning along the way.
I gotta ask because I've had a few guests that are based out of Oklahoma or visited Oklahoma. The public lands that you do have are really impressive, and I feel like it's kind of flying under the radar. Can you share a couple of your favorite memories there in Oklahoma as far as the outdoors?
For sure. I love like the Lake Tenkiller region. It's just a beautiful lake with really nice cliffs and hills. And my mom and I used to do this event, and this was before I was defining myself as non-binary, but we would do this event called Women in the Outdoors. And it was just like teaching women how to do all the things that were not generally taught as kids. So it's like archery and bow fishing and fly fishing and kayaking. And so I have these memories of kayaking along the Illinois River. It's like a big in like the Tahlequah area too, but we did a kayaking class. So that was really cool. I remember like that was the first time I saw bald eagles in the wild. Was we were kayaking kayaking, I think in the lake at that point, and we look up and there's bald eagles. And it was just incredible. But that's really when I fell in love with like kayaking, which I haven't done it a ton in California yet. And then my wife and I took this epic trip to the Wichita National Wildlife Refuge near Lawton, Oklahoma. So that's more deserty, and there's tons of bison and other animals. I've done some rock climbing with one of my best friends, Matt, in that area too, which was a great memory. That was like one of the few times I've gotten to climb outdoors, something I'm hoping to do more of in the coming year. Roman Nose State Park is pretty charming. I believe it was Oklahoma's first state park. It has some hiking trails. It also has a putt-putt course. We definitely got out as much as possible and did what we could given the climate and the public land availability.
And I'm glad you mentioned it because the Wichita Wildlife Preserve is on my bucket list next time I'm in Oklahoma, just for the simple fact that there's bisons there, and not just bisons, but great wildlife opportunities and just some really scenic viewpoints. It seems like it's a great place for sunrise or sunset. It's definitely on my bucket list next time I'm visiting Oklahoma.
Yeah, it's really beloved in the state for sure.
And Jaclyn, we're recording this a few days away from the official start of fall. And I always like to ask our guests at the start of the fall hiking season how their summer hiking season is, because I feel like for most people across the United States, that's when most of the mountains become more accessible. So a lot more trails are available to individuals. How was it this summer for you?
Well, as you know, we're a little spoiled here in LA because we can hike all the time. But I will say that my summer was really good, mainly because we had so much water. And I've really learned to cherish when we have a lot of water. Like one of my favorite hikes is along the Arroyo Seco. It starts out in like the river itself starts around Mount Wilson and comes down the mountain, and you can hike along whether it's Pasadena or another area. And that river, even though it's seasonal, it still has water in it. And I've been like waiting for it to dry up all year. Although looking out the window, it's been super cloudy all day. So we might have a rainstorm. Who knows? I've been really cherishing the water because even our waterfalls are still flowing. I was at Switzer Falls just about a week ago and it was still flowing. A friend asked me when we were hiking it, is there usually water this late? And I was like, I've gotten so spoiled. I don't remember when it didn't have water. That's been really special for me, especially because my dog Maggie is a black lab Australian cattle dog mix, and the lab in her like just wants to swim. And so the way we hike a lot and stay safe in the summer, especially, is like hiking along rivers and stuff like that. So my summer hiking was really fun outside of the, horrible heat wave that the West Coast had there for like a week and a half or so. So yeah.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned that heat wave because like here in Washington, it just was like 3 weeks of nothing but like 100 plus degrees on my side of the mountains. And like you said, you gravitate towards bodies of water, whether it's rivers, lakes. For you, based out of LA, how were you able to beat the heat and still enjoy the outdoors during that heat wave?
Well, Maggie and I were hiking early. We were getting up around like 6 a.m., which is early for me. But we tried to get out the door by 6:30 and get a few miles in to an area that I knew would be shady. We also were hiking at night. That's one of the nice things. Like we would head to like Griffith Park, and there's like a part of it where there's no gates that close. And so you don't have to worry about being like closed in. And, we would hike up to like Mount Hollywood, which is like weirdly not where the Hollywood sign is, but it offers like an amazing panoramic view. I did it last night actually for the full moon, and it was wonderful. So we would either do early in the day or at night for the most part, and then try to find spots that had water.
Oh yeah, that's the way to beat it because I do feel grateful that not just LA, but California in general, the last 2 winters have been really great for you guys. And you've been able to fill up the reservoirs. And like you said, springs and waterfalls are still flowing late into the season. So that's been really great to see because I feel like you guys almost had a decade where you were below the water levels that you were expecting. So it's always great to see, especially nature bounce back from a drought and still flourish. Now, one question I'm curious to hear your response. Coming from the Midwest and moving to LA, how would you describe the hiking scene in and around LA County now that you've been there for a couple of years?
I think what is really amazing to me about the hiking scene in LA is like, it is not the LA that you see on TV. Like people know like Rodeo Drive and Beverly Hills and Hollywood Boulevard. And like, I'll take my friends to those places if they want to, like to visit or go to the beach. Although I'll go to the tourist spots again if my friends want to. And like those places are great. And like, I love just the full diversity of things you can do in LA. Like I like to say there is a club for everyone here. Like if you are into a hobby, you could find your people because there are 10 million people who live here. The hiking scene is really wonderful. I find that it's pretty diverse. You know, when I'll go back to Oklahoma and I'm hiking, which I consider Oklahoma actually the South, because especially the part I grew up in, I do see mainly a lot of white people in the outdoors, which is a huge part of a huge issue in our outdoors community is like access and equity issues and making sure that everyone feels safe in the outdoors. In LA, I do see like a diverse array of people hiking, and I really love that. And I've seen the diversity increase over time, which I really attribute to like, there's been more and more BIPOC hiking groups that have been connecting with people, especially on Instagram. Like I call that like the good side of the internet is where people are using the internet for human connection, like you and I did, meeting on Instagram through your podcast. So I would say that the scene is very welcoming. I think there's a lot of great hiking clubs. I just wrote about the 5 a.m. crew. Those people get up at like 4 a.m. and then are out in Griffith Park by 5 a.m. I have told Omar, who leads that like maybe someday I'll get there, but that's a little early for me. But that group, yeah, that's a really diverse group of people in terms of not just ethnicity, but also like just hiking experience. Very welcoming group of people. So I find that the trail culture here, especially when you get into like Angeles National Forest, is that it's one of helping each other, you know? Like if you see somebody limping on the trail, like someone's going to stop and be like, hey, do you need some help? Oh, but even in LA, I mean, one time I overextended my hamstring because the soil here is like really sandy. It's not like dirt. That's in Oklahoma. It's sandy. And so like if you're hiking in like crappy running shoes, like I was doing, one of the mistakes I made, I was like, look down to peel a clementine and my like right leg just like flew out from under me. And I had to like MacGyver my dog's leash into like a brace where I was like using the handle to like carry my leg. And like multiple people, you know, stopped me and they were like, do you need some help? We were fine. But so I think there's a culture of openness and, you know, of course you see the influencers and that's fine. But on the hikes I'm doing, honestly, it's so far in the forest that I'm just seeing like the more like hardcore outdoorsy people.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the BIPOC community because the hiking community that I've been able to know about in LA, you do have a diverse range of hiking clubs, whether it's BIPOC led or like you said, Omar's crew, where they're literally getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning and going out there. And which is great because some people either they work late at night or they just don't have that opportunity in the afternoon or on the weekend. So being able to find a club that fits your needs is really special there in LA just because you have a wide range of groups and people that are leading some amazing clubs and getting more people out into the outdoors, which I think is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and we have some really amazing nonprofits and community groups that are pushing our local politicians to improve accessibility. Omar himself told me that when he was growing up in Boyle Heights, he struggled to reach trails in the mountains. He'd have to take multiple buses. I feel like there's an increasing awareness, thanks to community, about increasing those opportunities and making sure that everybody has access to green space. My wife and I used to live in Koreatown. The only park in Koreatown in LA, which is the most densely populated neighborhood in LA, is a park that is privately owned. And before we moved to another part of LA County, they had put up signs that basically said like, don't sit here. And so that was like the only green space. It was like this little group of 20 pine trees, you know, but they didn't want unhoused people. Like God forbid an unhoused person like lies down to rest on their private grass. And so it was really messed up that like, even they were blocking access from that very limited green space that like it's 40,000 people per square mile. So I do feel like there's a raising awareness from like pocket parks. You're seeing LA County build more parks. You're seeing LA City build more parks. And that's all thanks to community. That's just people demanding that they also have access to the outdoors.
Yeah, I will say that the hiking community in LA is really pushing for accessibility and diversifying the available spaces that are surrounding LA or in LA. Like for me, I have family there in South LA, grew up visiting every year, had no idea of what the hiking scene was, even like into my 20s and early 30s. And it wasn't until I connected with Justin from Just Trek, where it really started to open my eyes on what's available, not just surrounding LA County, but in LA itself. I'm curious for you, when you first got there, how did you familiarize yourself with the LA hiking scene? Did you join a club or did you do your own research and kind of went out and explored the trails on your own?
I did a lot of my own research. I think it's the journalist in me. But also because I was living in Koreatown, like I went from like growing up in a town of like 300-ish people, like the US Census doesn't formally count my town because it's unincorporated, to, living in Oklahoma City and then living in the most densely populated neighborhood in LA. So I needed to get out. And I already knew about AllTrails. And so I used it to like identify hikes around me and, started with kind of the obvious, which is Griffith Park. I think I went to Runyon Canyon once. I'm going to try not to trash talk Runyon, but it's not my favorite place to go, but it's precious to a lot of people. So I respect it. Dabbled in like going to the Santa Monica Mountains, which is a different kind of geography than Angeles. But honestly, after I started regularly adventuring in Angeles National Forest, that's when I really fell in love because that felt similar to home. Just lots of trees. And I would go on AllTrails and I would check like, you could filter by like popularity, and I would hit light traffic and then I would look through it. And like, yeah, there were some times where I'd find like a dud where it was overgrown or whatever. But I ended up finding like a ton of trails that way where it was just me and my dog Maggie just having a great time. I eventually invested in a Garmin so that my wife wouldn't worry as much. And so now I'm able to text her when we're out. And I do have friends who I hike with. I've honestly had a really negative experience with a hiking group where they were just not respecting my pronouns. Nobody introduced themselves and they were really focused on exercise. And that's just not my vibe. But that said, I would definitely go hike with the 5 a.m. crew because Omar is really great. And I do think that there's a lot of body positive groups in LA. So yeah, it was just a lot of trial and error. I definitely made mistakes. Like I would hike and it would be way too hot because one meteorological phenomenon in LA is you'll have an inversion layer, which is this big flat cloud that sits on LA, and it will be hotter in the mountains than it is on the ground. And so like there was a time where my dog and I were up at Mount Wilson and it was like 90 degrees, but you get back down to the ground and it's like 75 in LA, which is the total opposite. You can almost always guarantee that like it's going to be at least 10 degrees cooler at Mount Wilson. And like everybody on that trail was like dropping like flies. We were all like, what is happening? And I was like, oh, this is what happens when there's an inversion layer. It can like flip-flop the weather. It was wild.
Wow, that is wild because we have inversions, but only in the winter where, the fog will set or the clouds will set super low in our valley and get super cold. But then you go up to like 6,000 feet up into the mountains and it's sunny. It's like at least 10 to 15 degrees warmer. So the fact that that happens, is that typically like a certain time of the year, Jaclyn, like summertime, or it's just sporadic throughout the year?
I think it kind of happens in the summertime because like we have like gray May where it'll be super cloudy in May and June gloom and everybody complains about it. And then July comes and they're all melting and complaining about the sun. So, I do not complain about cloudy because I have a dog with black fur. And so we celebrate when there are clouds. But yeah, I think it can happen in the summer, honestly. And it just like flip flops the weather. And I've just learned to like look out for my local meteorologist. There's a meteorologist I follow. He's a climatologist actually, who does like a local forecast for San Gabriel Valley. His name's Edgar McGregor. He's great. So I just look for him to tell me there's going to be an inversion layer. So I know to look out for that.
And I'm going to have to borrow and steal that idea for filtering on popularity on AllTrails because I know some of the filters, but I didn't know that you can do it by traffic.
Yeah. Oh, it's like you scroll all the way down on filter and you'll see it. And I hope they never remove that option because it is such a little treat. Sometimes I'll just do like light and moderate, and then that way, and that's how I'm like never at Eaton Canyon, because that poor trail, it's so beautiful, but it's like so full. I mean, it's like the Hollywood Boulevard of hikes here, because like everybody knows it. Last time I was there, I was writing a story about the heat. And so I was looking for people who were trying to beat the heat. And so I went out there and I was just like overwhelmed at the number of people traveling on that trail. It was wild. So yeah, if it's a hike for me, I'm going to be where there are a few people and lots of trees.
I'm right there with you. Now, like I mentioned in your intro, you're an outdoor reporter for the LA Times. Can you share a little bit about how that came to be?
Yeah, it's very well known in my newsroom that I love hiking. We use Slack to communicate internally, and I started a hiking channel so that we could all talk about our hikes. I'm always posting on my Instagram, my personal one before I got my work one, and then posting on Facebook. And so like everybody knew, like, if you want to hike somewhere, you can probably ask Jaclyn and they'll tell you somewhere to go. But I was always like learning from my colleagues, because I have colleagues who like have a lot more experience in like the high Sierras, which I haven't got to really adventure into much, but plan to. So yeah, there was an opening, there was a need to fill the position, and I was kind of asked to do that and happily accepted. And here we are. So now I write The Wild, which is our weekly outdoors newsletter, which is a blast. I love that community and I really enjoyed everything that I've been learning. It feels a little self-serving sometimes, the topics I pick, because, I recently wrote about rattlesnakes because I was really freaked out by them. And through writing that piece, felt a lot calmer about it. I recently wrote about what to do if you see a bear, a black bear specifically, or California brown bear. That was because, again, I was like, when you read about what to do, when you see a bear, you get conflicting advice on the internet. So I was like, I'm going to the experts. I'm figuring this out. So yeah, it's been a blast. And I also write different hiking guides and stuff like that. I'm having a great time. I was a hardcore news reporter for more than half my life. This has been a change, but it's honestly been a welcome change.
I'm glad you mentioned the rattlesnake story, because I'm the same way. In Central Washington, we have rattlesnakes and we're still in rattlesnake season. So I tend to leave the desert trails to them for the summer and then go up into the mountains and then come back in the winter. But you had a really great conversation with, I think they were an LA-based herpetologist that gave you tips on what to do if you encountered a rattlesnake out on the trails. I'm wondering, what are some of the misconceptions that us as hikers might have about these unique and important species?
Yeah, I spoke to Dr. Erin McGee. She's easy to find on Instagram and very much worth following for her interesting content on snakes and lizards. Erin told me, like, one of the things I have seen multiple times on like Reddit and different hiking vlogs is people asking, should I throw a rock at the snake to scare it off? Erin basically said, if someone threw a rock at me, that would upset me quite a bit. So maybe don't do that. My biggest takeaway was you need to just respect the animal like you would with any animal that you see, because the people listening to Hikes and Mikes are not the people taking selfies with bison, right? Like, we are like people who love the outdoors and want to respect it and leave no trace. So she was talking about how like making noise is really helpful. So like one thing I do, like especially when I get to like a narrow section of a trail, I will like shuffle my feet and kind of stomp a bit just to like let the snakes know that I'm there. And she actually said that that's a good idea. Like, that's something you should be doing if you're in an area where you might not have as much room to get away from them. But she really emphasized that like rattlesnakes don't want to interact with us. And so like, if you have that rare example where like one is coming toward you, it's just because it wants to travel in that direction. And likely if you get out of its way, it will just pass by you if you give it enough space and go about its business. And that's only if like it's a pretty bold rattlesnake. Another type of rattlesnake that's more shy might see you, get off the trail, hide, and then you never actually see it. I think I have probably hiked past hundreds of rattlesnakes and never seen them. The funny thing was, when I went to Kings Canyon for work, which is a crazy thing to say because I got to go to Kings Canyon for work. I walked over this hill in this pretty foresty area, wasn't thinking about rattlesnakes. And I heard that classic like sound. And I was like, okay. And I turned around and there was one like kind of next to a rock off the trail, just like letting me know it was there. And I was like, thank you for letting me know. And I stood there and waited to see if there was another hiker who was behind me. And there was. And I let him know, hey, there's a rattlesnake, give it a wide berth. And he did. And then I think he kind of hung out for the next person. So I was a lot calmer. Now, that said, I did have a recent experience where I was hiking in the Placerita Canyon area, which is a really nice, like kind of, it's in a transition zone. So it's like desert and forest, kind of in like northern LA County a bit. And I was just there and I heard something in the bushes and I just assumed it was like birds or squirrels, because we all know that like birds and squirrels can make so much noise and make us think that there's a bear. And then it pops out and it's just like a yellow warbler. And you're like, that was really rude of you to shave those 7 years off my life. So I'm like standing there looking at the trail map and I hear this noise and I get like 15 feet on the trail and I hear something over my shoulder and I look up and these two snakes have come up out of the bushes and they are looking at me. And I was like, this is where I die. Like, this is it for me. They looked at me for a second. They weren't hissing or anything. And then they wrapped themselves around each other and went back into the bushes and the throes of passion. And I was like, that is the weirdest thing I have ever witnessed on the trail. So I don't know what kind of snakes they were, but I got out of there and did not take any pictures because I was worried there was more. So
That's a wild experience.
it was so weird. They were only like 8 feet away.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know why y'all needed to involve me in that situation. I'm not interested. Like, please carry on.
Now, one of the other articles that you wrote, and I think it was one of your first big stories as the outdoor reporter, and it's something that I've asked myself now over the last 2 to 3 years, is like, what are some great campsites in and around LA where you don't necessarily have to travel like 4 or 5 hours? How was it researching that article? And what are some of your favorite places to go camping in and around LA?
That article was so much fun because my wife and I have camped a fair amount around LA, but I hadn't been to a lot of those campsites. And so it was really fun to just like, my job was to drive around LA and investigate where you could have the most fun. And so I personally love camping at Chileo Campground in Angeles National Forest. It's kind of like a high desert situation. You're not quite to like the pine tree situation where you have like, but there are pine trees, but it still feels kind of deserty too. And you can just get beautiful night skies there. It's cooler because it's higher elevation. And so I knew about Chileo and, you know, it was a really huge adjustment for me to deal with the reservation system on recreation.gov. It's not something I was familiar with from Oklahoma or like Arkansas, Missouri, any of the areas I'd already been really. And so it was kind of a bummer, honestly, when like I was like trying to go camping in these places that everyone loved and you needed to be like, you know, setting up your Yosemite trip for the following year in like November or something, you know, that's not generally how I live my life. And so it's really nice because I counted there's about 30 first come, first serve campsites in and around LA County. And so I included 9 of them in the guide. And they were the nine ones that like broken down by level. And so I wrote like, if you just want to drive up and have like a very simple time, there's going to be water, like potable water, all the things, you know, and we broke it down all the way into like backpacking, basically, which I myself have actually never backpacked. And so that was fun for me to like hike to those different locations and scout them out. And I'm hoping to do my first backpacking trip maybe in October.
Oh, that's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
You know, your newsletter really has some great stories over the last couple weeks and months. For individuals that haven't had a chance to subscribe to The Wild, what are some other type of articles they could expect to see in their inbox in the coming weeks or months?
Yeah. So one thing that I'm really excited that we're launching is Outdoor Survival Stories. There used to be a podcast that unfortunately very recently ended. It's called Out Alive. If you haven't listened to it, it's fantastic. I think it was through Backpacker Magazine. And they talk to people about how they survived different wilderness emergencies. I learned a ton from it. I love reading wilderness survival stories because I know the person's going to live and I'm going to learn from them. It's going to be called Between a Rock, from the phrase between a rock and a hard place. And our first story, which should be out by the time this podcast comes out, is about a woman who was camping right on the beach, no tent, in the Lost Coast of Northern California. She woke up to the sound of what sounded like a cat coughing coughing up a hairball. And it was sadly not a little kitty, but a mountain lion up on the ridge. And what she had to do without any sort of weapon, she's not like a gun person at all, but she didn't even have a knife or anything with her. And she, as you'll read in the story, the only way she was able to like really deter the mountain lion from coming down to the beach where she and her partner were very exposed was just by blinding it with a flashlight for like 15 to 20 minutes. And it's just like a harrowing tale. And so we're going to try to publish those once a month. We got about 30 submissions from people from all over California. So I'm like super excited about that series because I just really appreciate when people are vulnerable and share what they did. And, you know, it's a lot of people who are being very humble and like talking about like, these are the mistakes I made, you know, like, you know, Tanya, the first person who interacted with the mountain lion, like she and I talked about how like neither of us would assume the Lost Coast was a place with mountain lions. Like I would just think like you're on the beach, like that doesn't scream mountain lion to me. But since her experience, she has learned that there are just heaps of mountain lions in that area because it's very remote and it's on my bucket list to hike. So yeah, people can definitely see that. And I think I'm going to be working on a backpacking guide for how to backpack around LA because we do have some really cool backpacking trips you can take, including the Gabrielino Trail, which is like more than 30 miles through Angeles National Forest. And it's just a long, beautiful river. And there's these deep pools that you can swim in and these really lovely remote campgrounds as you're going along. So that's definitely a trail I'm hoping to be able to tackle in 2025, especially if there's a section of it that's been closed for a while and that's set to hopefully reopen soon. So that's some of what I'm going to be up to. Yeah. And whatever else me and my editor can cook up.
And Jaclyn, how can folks subscribe to The Wild?
LAtimes.com/The Wild. And you do not have to be a subscriber of the LA Times, although it is appreciated, but The Wild will come to your inbox in its entirety for free every Thursday at 11 a.m. And then if you feel so moved, you can subscribe, but otherwise you'll just be one of my loyal Wild readers. And I welcome that too.
We'll be sure to put that in the episode show notes so people can subscribe. And I'm glad you're doing that story with positive endings because during that true crime phase a couple years ago, I got into like, I forgot what the podcast name, I think it was called Park Predators. And they were all like bad stories where like I started getting anxiety being out in the outdoors by myself. And I kind of attribute it to not just listening to that podcast, but just, you know, kind of going head on with true crime during that craze. So I'm glad that you're doing something where people, you know, survived and share their experiences because I think it's very valuable to know from people's mistakes and to learn and grow from your own as well.
Totally. I saw the Park Predators recommended for me. I respect the work. It's hard to produce a podcast, but it is not for me for the same reasons because I would just be anxious in the outdoors. You know, I'm someone who was assigned female at birth and I'm out there with just my dog. So, but I do have bear spray, folks. So don't mess with me.
Now, Jaclyn, we like to do a segment here on the podcast where we do a deep dive into our guest's Instagram and ask them about a post or a location that captured our attention. And this was recently, but you posted a full moon hike that you just recently did. And that's something that's been suggested for my hiking club, possibly not this year, but next year, is to do some full moon hikes because it sounds like it's a really fun and unique hiking experience. How was it completing a full moon hike there in LA? And what are some of your favorite places that you'd like to catch a full moon?
Yeah, I try to do a full moon hike if I can every month. So recently, just yesterday, I was out with a friend. She had never done like a hike at night in Griffith Park and was feeling a little anxious because, you know, there are a lot of coyotes in Griffith Park and these LA coyotes don't play. Like they're sometimes not scared of humans. We did end up seeing a coyote, but luckily we were able to like shoo it away. More importantly, we had this incredible experience where we got to just watch the moon rise over LA. And it started out in that really pretty reddish orange color, which is because it's closer to the horizon. So you get those beautiful colors. And then as it rises, it becomes, you know, just the moon that we're used to seeing. But it's a really unique experience where I think you get to see a place that maybe you hike in a lot from a totally different perspective because like different animals are going to come out. Like on some of my full moon hikes, my friend Machiko like point out and be like, there's a bat. And then like last night we heard multiple owls and got to stand and listen to one and watch it like preening itself up high on a tree. And and it hooted through the whole time we were trying to scare off this coyote, which we thought was really funny. So my whole thing is like pick a trail that's wide and pretty well maintained, just because you want to be able to see where you're going. The moonlight does provide quite a bit of light. Like we didn't really have to use headlamps for the majority of our hike. But yeah, I love doing the Mount Hollywood hike in Griffith Park. And also there's another place in Griffith Park called 5 Points, where my colleagues and I were out there doing a full moon hike to 5 Points. And just as we crested over the hill, the moon was rising and we all just audibly gasped. It was just so beautiful. So even though I've been to Griffith Park tons in the day, I do have like these really memorable special experiences from hiking it at night.
You sold me. I'm hoping the weather holds out and maybe I could do one in October. But yeah, you answered my question too, because from what I've heard is, especially if it's an wide open trail, like you don't really need a headlamp to navigate. And that's always in the back of my mind, do you need to have a headlamp on at all times? But if you got clear skies, it sounds like more than likely there's enough light coming from the moon that you're able to navigate without the use of them.
Yeah, I would bring it, but you don't generally need it unless you're like coming through a part that's like more washed out or something. Sometimes people bring hiking poles that helps out as well. And I encourage all that. My whole thing with hiking with me, and I'm sure it's the same as hiking with you, Ivan, is like do what you need to help you feel safe so you can have the best time. It's a really great experience. I think I'm going to hit Echo Mountain as another full moon hike. I was hiking near there for a full moon hike. And although we saw the moon off the trail we were on, we saw a bunch of people up on Echo Mountain with their little headlamps. We could see them hiking down. And we were like, that's the place to be.
It sounds like it's becoming a little popular to do full moon hikes in LA. Are you seeing more and more people out on the trails on some of these full moon hikes that you've done?
Oh, yeah. It's totally a thing now. I don't know what's happened the past year, but I feel like people have gotten really into it. And that makes me really happy because like it's people out connecting outdoors to just look at the moon. Like we're not looking at screens, like, yeah, we're taking pictures because it's beautiful. But yeah, no, there were very few points last night where me and my friend were by ourselves. We had like people we were passing on the trail, even kids out doing full moon hike with their parents, which is really sweet. But yeah, it's a very much a regular thing, especially in the front country for folks, because you do have to consider like bears and mountain lions. But in the front country, that's less of an issue. So yeah, especially in Griffith Park, because we no longer have P22, sadly.
Oh, that's right. Now, Jaclyn, these last 3 questions that we have, we like to ask all our guests. For you specifically, do you have a regular hiking routine or summit routine, or maybe at the end of the hike? For some, it's maybe just packing a favorite snack or drink. For others, it's a moment of zen. And then for a lot of us, it's the favorite meal afterwards. Is there a regular customer routine that you like to do when you reach your destination or when you make it back out?
I would say that my moment of zen, if I can get a little woo-woo on you, is whenever I see a red-tailed hawk above me, because my brother Clinton died of brain cancer just over 6 years ago. And I am someone who believes in signs. And he'll always send me a red-tailed hawk. It's become so much that my friends actually like believe it because they don't see them with other people as much as they see them with me. And so there's just so often, like last night when we started our hike, one flew just like 15 feet above our heads. And so I told my friend, I said, here's our hawk. And I also do see them when I'm like having a hard day, but I consistently see them on hikes. I was on a hike with one of my best friends and she was, just bemoaning how much it costs to live in LA and talking about she just doesn't know if she can keep living here. And a red-tailed hawk like flew right past us in the canyon. And she was like, okay, Clinton, I'm going to keep trying. So that's definitely my moment of zen. It's a regular occurrence and just really special to me. And I think it's a red-tailed hawk because it's something my dad always pointed out when we were kids. We'd be driving down the road and my dad would just say, there's that red-tailed hawk up on the light pole or something, And so it's something we grew up with and something that, we have them here in LA as well.
Oh, that's a beautiful connection and a great thing that you've been able to share with your friends. That's really awesome, Jaclyn. I appreciate you sharing that.
Thank you.
Now, this one is more about your pack list. Do you tend to carry a luxury item that falls outside of the essentials? And luxury, not necessarily like cost-wise, but just something that you might not necessarily need out on the trails, but it's either a comfort item or just something that you'd like to bring.
So my pack, I'm not an ultralight person. My pack is generally kind of heavy. Part of it is because like I'm a helper. I really love the trail culture where we all help each other out. So my first aid kit, I try to keep it updated and with stuff that people might not think about. I always carry the emergency ice packs where if you punch them through the middle, they'll become immediately cold, because I myself, knock on wood, have had I extended my hamstring. An ice pack would have been real helpful. And then you just see people with twisted ankles and different things like that. So I always have one of those with me. In the winter, I carry hot hands, both for myself and for folks on the trail. And yeah, I don't skimp on things that I might need. I generally have a bivy with me just in case. I do love to carry a small hiking blanket, which I always plan to sit on. And then when I get it out, my dog lays down on it and takes up all of it. So I just end up sitting on a rock, which is fine because I love her. I do bring a lot of really epic snacks. I'm big on let's go get a sandwich beforehand, or let's pack some donuts and enjoy that at the waterfall or the top of this peak where we're headed.
Okay, I like that. It doesn't happen often, but every once in a while, you do encounter the hiker that might be ill-prepared, where they might need a rain poncho here in the Pacific Northwest, or hand warmers or an ice pack, just in case you do encounter somebody in need. I'm going to have to borrow that one as well. Now, the last question, Jaclyn, is by the time this episode comes out, it's going to be the end of 2024. Do you have any hiking or travel goals for the remainder of the year and for 2025?
One thing I am super excited about is I booked the last campsite available in Death Valley for their Dark Sky Festival in February. It turns out that there are multiple national parks that have dark sky festivals, Sequoia and Kings Canyon also have one. They just had theirs in September. So I noticed that Death Valley was going to have their Dark Sky Festival. They have tons of programming and all kinds of stuff. And so I just booked a campsite. I made it where it's 2 tents, 8 people. I had no idea who was going to come with me. I just did it because I'd been interviewing all these people who just do incredible things. And I was like, man, it's time to get to living. And so I'm very excited about that. I also recently made a spreadsheet of all the peaks in Angeles National Forest because I really want to start checking those off my list. I don't think I'll get to all of them in 2025, but I think over the next 3 years, I could probably get to all of them because there are a lot. But it's also just a way to get off the beaten path and try new stuff and just see what's out there, because I do have the tendency to go to the same areas. I love Mount Waterman in Angeles National Forest. I've hiked it several times and it's beautiful, but I might want to try to hike a few other peaks that I've never been to and see what that vantage point is.
And I got to ask, because I've never heard of the Dark Sky Festival, what can people potentially expect if they are able to snag a campsite during one of those festivals?
Tons of stargazing, different panels to talk about space and the dark sky, just tons of learning opportunities. I think there's just going to be lots of education for the whole family. And then also telescopes available to look through different things. The full programming from Death Valley is not fully out yet, but I looked at their 2023 and it was pretty epic. But I think the whole point is just building community and getting to know people and educating folks about the wonders of space.
Oh, I love that. I'm going to have to check out if Mount Rainier has one.
Do it.
Now, Jaclyn, we're at the tail end of the podcast, and we always like to finish off each episode with a round of this or that questions. They're all hiking related. We're going to give you 2 hiking topics, and you just choose which one you prefer out of the 2. And if you can't choose, you can say both or neither. The first one is, do you prefer hiking in the summer or in the fall?
Fall.
And then this one's a tough one. Waterfalls or summits?
Oh, both.
And then this is a trail system question, but if you had a choice, would you prefer a trail with switchbacks or would you rather just go straight up?
Switchbacks, though I hate every one of them.
I'm right there with you. And this one's our most controversial one, but trek poles or freehand?
Trek poles, although I forget them all of the time and end up doing freehand.
And then this one's about your footwear, but trail runners or hiking boots?
Boots, because I'm very clumsy.
And then another trail system question, but do you prefer a loop trail or an out back trail?
Loop, because you get to see new stuff on the other side.
And then if you had to choose between these 2, would you rather be on a muddy trail or an extremely rocky trail?
Oh, that's the impossible question. I think muddy, because I've been on some extremely rocky trails lately, and I was very irritated.
I'm right there with you. And then these next two are our hardest ones, in my opinion. And LA is known for these next two to have spectacular ones, but sunset hikes or sunrise hikes?
I mean, I am more likely to be awake for a sunset hike, but I like the concept of a sunrise hike because then you go about your day and get to take a really good nap.
And then spring wildflowers or fall colors?
Spring wildfires for what wildfires? Geez, you can tell what's on my mind. Spring wildflowers because I'm good. That's a lot easier to see here, although I am working on a story about fall foliage.
Now, the last one is if you had a choice, would you rather do a steep climb or long distance?
Probably long distance, just because I have exercise-induced asthma. So I can go a long ways, but those steep climbs I'll do them, but it's just a little rough sometimes.
Well, that was it, Jaclyn, for the this or that questions. If folks want to follow your adventures there in LA and your upcoming adventures in 2024 and 2025, where are some of the best places they can follow your adventures on social media or online?
Definitely on the wild, and then on the LA Times page on my author page. But if you want to follow me on Instagram, my Instagram handle is JACInthewild.LA.
And we'll be sure to link those in the episode show notes so people can check them out. Jaclyn, it's been a blast talking with you about your experiences there hiking in LA, and you definitely shed some new lights and new experiences for me in the coming year. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to speak with me.
Thank you, Ivan. I am looking forward to promoting your podcast in the wild.
And that brings us to the end of this episode alongside Jaclyn. We extend a heartfelt thanks to them for coming on the podcast. Make sure to follow their adventures on Instagram at JACinthewild.LA. Also, don't forget to check out the episode show notes to learn more and to subscribe to Jaclyn's newsletter, The Wild from the Los Angeles Times. We have an incredible lineup of episodes planned throughout the fall months, and we can't wait to share them with you. New episodes will be dropping every Monday, with occasional bonus episodes on Fridays. To ensure that you never miss out on those thrilling tales, remember to hit the like and subscribe button. Your support means the world to us. Don't forget to join our vibrant community on Instagram at Hikes and Mics. We'll be sharing episode visuals, my own personal hiking content, and so much more. Let's stay connected and continue to inspire each other on this remarkable journey. As we bid farewell, remember to tread those happy trails, embrace the great outdoors, and keep the spirit of adventure alive. Until next time, my fellow explorers, happy hiking. This episode's music was created by Ketsa. Follow him on Instagram at Ketsa Music. This episode is brought to you by Ursa Minor Outfitters. Folks, I'm absolutely in love with my loon mug. It's handmade, it's an absolute piece of art. Whether it's at the office or at the house, people keep asking to check it out. If you're not a loon fan, they also have other beautiful mugs for wildlife fans of moose, bears, and eagles. They specialize in products highlighting the outdoors and local pride through quality design by local artists. They've even started expanding into items beyond mugs, like apparel, dog accessories, and soon candles and more. They also try to partner and highlight other small businesses, and in some cases, forego profits in lieu of charitable giving to help their community, such as the dog rescue. So check them out, ursaminooroutfitters.com, and enter promo code HikesMikes10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order. And for our four-legged hiking partners, they also have a portable silicone dog bowl and also a sweet over-the-collar dog bandana. Go check them out, ursaminooroutfitters.com, and don't forget to enter promo code HikesMikes10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order.